So good morning, everyone. My name is Lenore Anderson, and I'm the Executive Director of Californians for Safety and Justice. Welcome. This is the second annual Survivors Speak Conference, the second annual. Here we are. So I'm very honored to be here with you this morning. I want to start off by expressing gratitude. Thank you for being here. Thank you for traveling long distances from San Diego, from Fresno, Los Angeles, the Bay Area, and all over Sacramento too. Thank you also for your willingness to join in the conversation that we're about to have today. We're not here, as you know, to talk about light subjects or easy topics. In fact, we're here to talk about some of the most difficult, profound, and complicated issues in our lives and that the state of California faces. So the fact that you're here with us this morning is both humbling and inspiring. It gives me great hope for the future of our state. We hope that today will help you in your own healing journey. It is certainly going to help the healing journey that California's safety and justice systems need. Are we ready to heal California's safety and justice systems? As you all know, our safety and justice systems have been sorely out of balance in California for decades. But the work we're doing together, this is the work that is about a movement to rebalance our priorities. And can you feel it? Can you feel the movement on the rise, the change that's happening in California? This is an incredibly exciting time, and so much of it is because of what you all have been doing. 2014 was an incredible year. It was a breakthrough year for rebalancing justice priorities in California. And a lot of you participated in that breakthrough. We started off early in 2014 doing something that most of you are aware of, and that is that we created the first ever permanent funding stream in the state budget for trauma recovery services for crime survivors. So that was our intro to 2014. And these are, as you know, the sorely needed services, right? The kinds of trauma recovery supports that's at the community level that can find and reach out and support hard to reach victims of serious crime, violent crime, provide one-stop support for comprehensive trauma recovery. And that was just the beginning. That was early in 2014. We ended 2014 with the yes on Proposition 47. Many of you that are here today were a part of that historic California campaign. So Proposition 47 was overwhelmingly passed by voters in November, and it was a major step towards rebalancing California's safety and justice priorities. We took low-level nonviolent crimes and changed them from felonies to misdemeanors, and then we reinvested the money. We're reinvesting those dollars from overspending on prisons to treatment and, importantly, trauma recovery services for crime survivors. So in just 2 short years since we started these conferences, we've had a tremendous impact on victim services in our state. We created the first grant program for trauma recovery services, then we made it permanent, and now with Proposition 47, the amount of funding that will be going to that will increase by 5 times, making it the largest trauma recovery services grant program in the United States. So this was, by all accounts, a major rebalance of safety and justice priorities. This was the first time, in addition to creating the largest trauma recovery services grant program, there were a couple of other firsts connected to Prop 47. It was the first time voters chose to change multiple sections of the penal code for the explicit purpose of reducing over-incarceration and reallocating prisons money to treatment. It was also the first time that voters elected to allow Californians with old nonviolent felony convictions on their records to get those records changed, opening up new opportunities for stability, housing, jobs, the kinds of things that help us stop the cycle of crime. But it was also the first time that crime survivors played a key role in a campaign to reduce over-incarceration. We partnered with so many of you to win that campaign because it wasn't just about reducing over-incarceration. It was about what we're trying to replace overspending on prisons with. And the priorities that emerged, the priorities that were in Proposition 47 came from our relationship and our partnership with crime survivors across the state. So this was really no small feat. With the entire nation watching, California crime survivors joined with forward-thinking law enforcement, conservatives, liberals, Democrats, Republicans, business, labor, celebrities and artists, grassroots organizations, faith leaders to change the priorities in California and rebalance. Let me remind you why this rebalance is so important, especially for crime survivors in our state. Before launching Californians for Safety and Justice in 2012, I worked inside government on public safety issues in the cities of both San Francisco and Oakland and in the DA's office. I remember Michael. He was a 16-year-old boy that was standing outside of a school one afternoon, and he was gunned down and killed. Michael's killing was witnessed by multiple people, young people, mostly his age, who were at school that day. We later learned that not one of these young people who saw this horrific incident got trauma recovery services, help, or support. No therapy program, no support group, no official formal reach out to deal with the trauma, the stress, the anxiety that emerges when violence is exposed. This wasn't the first time some of these young people had experienced this kind of violence, and for some, we can imagine it wasn't the last. I learned this wasn't necessarily a failure of the schools. Too few of them have programs for young people on campus, no health-based center, no treatment programs, no counselors, barely enough teachers to help the students. And it wasn't certainly the fault of the healthcare system. Treatment programs across the cities have waiting lists far longer than they can ever accommodate. After we passed Proposition 47, I learned about another person. This was a person, Darren, who just a couple of months ago was released from California State Prison. He had served more than 20 years for possession of 0.15 grams of drugs. For perspective, that's about 1/3 the weight of a paperclip. Shockingly, the only reason he was released from state prison was because of Proposition 47. If it hadn't been for 47, he would still be sitting in California's prisons today. So we have a question we've got to ask ourselves. Our state doesn't have the resources or capacity to get the young people who witnessed Michael's shooting support, and yet we have Darren incarcerated for multiple decades over such a minor crime. We really have to ask ourselves, is this about safety and justice? To be sure, we need accountability when people commit crimes. That's essential, fundamental for what the criminal justice system is supposed to do. But extreme sentencing and bloated prisons will not change the life chances of the youth that witnessed Michael's shooting that day. To rebalance our priorities, we actually have to ask the question, who are crime survivors? While, let me tell you, while 1 in 5 Californians have been victimized by crime, 2 out of 3 crime survivors are repeatedly victimized. In fact, the biggest single indicator that you will be a crime victim is whether or not you've survived a crime in the past. And who's most likely to be repeatedly, frequently victimized? In California, low-income communities, communities of color, and young people are at the greatest risk. Given how widespread surviving crime is and just how vulnerable victims are to repeat crimes, how we respond is nothing short of essential. Yet, national statistics reveal something pretty shocking. Less than half of all violent crime is even reported to criminal justice authorities, less than half. And of that, less than half results in a criminal prosecution. So we have a safety and justice system that, despite a virtual epidemic level of victimization, is able to respond to about 25%. Meanwhile, the cost of criminal justice has been going up and up, taking up more and more of a percentage of our state budget. In the last 30 years, for example, prison spending in California has gone up by 1,500%. We built 22 new prisons. We have 5 times more prisoners. The state now spends more than $10 billion a year. But if this is a response to only a fraction of the crime incidents that are occurring in our state, and it depletes the very resources we need to lift communities up, we have to ask ourselves, is extreme sentencing in bloated prisons really about protecting the vulnerable? Could it look different? What if we had billions of dollars per year to reach as many crime survivors as possible to stop the cycle of crime? One of the most consistent things that we've heard from survivors across the state of California is that we can't continue to pretend that overspending on prison really puts survivors at the center of our safety and justice priorities. What does putting the majority of survivors at the center of our safety and justice priorities look like? Over the years, we've collected some ideas and have a few thoughts on what the priorities should be. Safe houses and safe places to go when crisis erupts. Safe passages to and from school for our young people. Trauma-informed health services, trauma recovery services. Accessible mental health and drug treatment that's funded at scale, that can actually reach everyone who needs those kinds of supports. Family support programs. And importantly, improving the relationship between police, prosecutors, and the communities most impacted by crime, so we can build trust and solve more crimes. The list goes on and on. So at this conference, it's very important. This conversation couldn't matter more. It's an opportunity to amplify your voices, to talk about what are our new safety priorities for California. We invite you today to join in this conversation and answer the question, what does putting survivors of crime at the center of our policymaking look like? We are excited to hear your answers to that question today and excited to continue to build our movement to transform California. Thank you.